There's no point in me adding a spoiler warning here, so let's just start, shall we? This is my analysis of the significance of Wilbur Soot's revival on the Dream SMP, which took place yesterday, and which is perhaps the single most interesting plot lore development thing on the SMP since, well, Tommy being killed, honestly. This is crazy in more ways than meet the eye at first. If you do enjoy the video, please do feel free to subscribe. We just hit 50,000 subscribers, which is insane. Thank you all so much. And I really want to try and keep that momentum going. So, graph. Alright, so to really look at the significance of our favorite president being revived. What's that? He's not your favorite president? You actually, in reality, hate this character for the destruction and emotional damage he brought to the server and we're happy to see him go? Alright, so to really look at the significance of the, former president of L'Manberg being revived, the best place to start is probably to look at how he reacted to being alive again. The first thing that sticks out to me like a sore thumb, the first thing that really shows us that revived Wilbur is not the same Wilbur we once knew, is that he seems to revel in his new lease on life and wants to, in his words, ride that horse for all it's worth. This seems pretty normal, right? Who wouldn't act this way? Until you realize that Wilbur literally begged Phil to kill him when he lost his last life. This was a man who pleaded with his father to be removed from the mortal realm. Limbo must have changed Wilbur dramatically for him to have swung from a character begging to be killed to being boisterous, excited, and desperate to not only dramatically utilize his new lease on life, but to also keep that life for as long as possible. Another super interesting thing to note, although Wilbur seemed to heavily regret asking Phil to kill him, he didn't show a single ounce of regret for blowing up L'Manberg. Indeed, he seems happily surprised that he, air quotes, managed to blow up L'Manberg so utterly. He didn't, of course, he was witnessing the aftermath of Techno and Dream's actions, but it strikes me as very interesting that he was delighted that he had done more than he planned for, with not an ounce of remorse on show. He didn't, and still doesn't, regret blowing up L'Manberg. Indeed, he would probably do it again. His motivations, the core ideology that drove him to blow up L'Manberg, that didn't change even after 13.5 years in limbo. If anything, they probably got stronger. What are those ideologies? Well, let me lay it out for you. According to Wilbur, his own personal limbo was a train station, a platform on which he was trapped, unable to board any trains, unheard, alone, and stuck. It's also very interesting, though probably not canon and probably just a head nod, that the lyrics to Wilbur's song Jubilee Line from Your City Gave Me Asthma, an album he released a few years ago, seem to fit Wilbur's predicament in limbo almost perfectly. He mentions yelling at the walls till his lungs were hoarse. Talks about how he loved when Tommy arrived and hated to see him go.
I hate to see you leaving.
Even calling it a fate worse than dying. Which is how Tommy described being revived. He said he would have much rather preferred either being dead or not being killed at all, calling his revival, in essence, a fate worse than dying.
Fate worse than dying.
Tommy said he would have much rather preferred either being dead or not being killed at all, calling his revival, in essence, a fate worse than dying.
I wish I'd have just died or stayed here, but not in between. Because the in-between, Turbo, the in-between is absolutely fucked up.
We also found out that each dead person, so JSchlatt, Wilbur, Mexican Dream, and briefly Tommy, sees limbo in their own way and sees the other dead people with whom they can communicate as manifested in those spaces. We know this because Wilbur said that, for him, Tommy arrived and left limbo on a train conducted by Dream, so that's interesting to say the least. And I was thinking about these parallels, right, and just outside of the analysis for a second, I had a cool headcanon, I think it's called, and it was that Wilbur, on seeing Tommy arriving in limbo on a train, tried to board it to get out of limbo and was stopped by, well, barriers on the tube line. And later, while Tommy was being brought back to life by Dream, Wilbur, being desperate to get back to being alive, tried to jump onto the tracks, thinking that if he died in limbo, he would come back to life. But again, there were barriers on the tube line. Again, the story of the SMP is probably just being subtly modified to nod at Your City Gave Me Asthma, and this was just an idea that I had while exploring that connection. So, what is that ideology I was talking about earlier then? Well, it's the ideology that's driven Wilbur's actions from the very start of the SMP, the thing that made him create L'Manberg, the thing that drove him to fight for L'Manberg, and the thing that drove him to destroy L'Manberg. Freedom. The one thing that drives Wilbur's character through thick and thin is his desire to be free, this desire, this belief that freedom should come first. That, and only that, seems to have remained unchanged with Wilbur in Limbo. And that makes sense when you think about it. He was stuck, trapped, boxed like a fish, you could say. And obviously the one thing that would stay with him, the one thing that he would cling to, would be his belief that he should be free. This is so intrinsically ingrained into Wilbur's character that even Ghostbur, the most pure, unadulterated form of him, was motivated by freedom alone in most situations. Freedom being a motivation becomes the main basis for the rest of his theory and analysis, because when you think of freedom on the Dream SMP nowadays, there's one person who comes to mind. Dream. There have been 2 attempts to break Dream out of prison as of now, and both were planned with one similarity, one common element that only emboldens my claim that revived Wilbur will be the one to break Daddy Dream.
Yeah, Daddy Dream! Oh, wait.
Out of prison. TNT is that element. Tommy planned to use a TNT cannon to break in and get past the mining fatigue, and when Tommy was locked in the prison for the first time, when lockdown was first initiated for him, it was because of TNT being blown up within earshot of the prison cell. It's theorized that this was an ender walking Granbu, but hey, that's just a theory, and either way, TNT was enough of a threat to the prison's integrity that Sam locked it down for several weeks, letting Tommy get killed because of the magnitude of the threat. Wilbur, or at least a version of Wilbur that was revived by Dream, is among the most experienced on the server in terms of TNT, third only to Dream and Techno. TNT's impact on Wilbur's entire life is what made him the creator of man he is now. Everything from the first TNT cannon used by the Dream Team against L'Manberg in the First War, to the TNT used after the famous Independence or Death line, to the TNT which blew up L'Manberg, everything in Wilbur's life has been affected by TNT. The man has canonically spent multiple days wiring up TNT, rigging it to explode, learning its intricacies in and out. He's extremely familiar with TNT. Apart from this, there's the way in which Wilbur talks of Dream after being revived. In every single situation before his death, Wilbur portrayed Dream as the villain, made him the bad guy, even going so far as to declare himself evil during the Pogtopia arc, and then actively side with Dream. Even when he was acting as a villain intentionally, even when he was telling everyone that he was the bad guy, Wilbur refused to call Dream the hero. Dream was always the villain, the antithesis. This had an effect on Dream as well, but that's a whole other video. The point is, revived Wilbur called Dream his hero. For the first time, probably ever, Dream was Wilbur's good guy, and we know that Wilbur saw and still sees Dream as the villain of the SMP's plotline as a whole, which means that in calling him his hero, Wilbur is essentially confirming to us, the audience, he doesn't plan to stick to any moral code or philosophy with his new lease on life. Indeed, he plans to act as the villain, just as he did before his death. So, sure, Wilbur is going to act as the villain again, great. What's setting this apart from the Pogtopia arc then? What makes this any different? What did Wilbur learn from that 13.5-year stint in Limbo? Well, it's simple. The one thing that changed the course of the Pogtopia arc was Tommy telling Wilbur that he was to blame for all that had gone wrong, effectively loading him up with guilt and sorrow and regret, making him unstable emotionally and mentally, forcing him to the point where he would beg for his own father to kill him. Wilbur realized that in Limbo. He's not going to be guilt-tripped again. Indeed, he's not going to accept any blame for anything anymore. I think that what's going to set this arc apart from the others is that Wilbur will finally not care about the negative consequences of his actions. He will do as he sees fit. He will be damned. A man who has nothing to lose, with this much bravado and experience and gusto, with this mindset, that is a man to be wary of. Wilbur is now willing to do anything for freedom, and the longer the members of the SMP wait to deal with him, the harder he'll be to thwart. We know that as time progresses, Wilbur will remember more and more of Ghostbur's memories, and the longer he's allowed to remember, the more he'll learn, the more he'll know, the more powerful he'll be. He won't feel any of the emotion that Ghostbur felt, even pulling out a sword at the sight of friend, and will just be presented with the cold, hard information. Information that he'll use in any way he wants to get at his ideal view of the server, to get at that twisted version of freedom. And that is the significance of Wilbur Soot revival on the Dream SMP. Subscribe!